Morning guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. We may well be in the winter break at this point of the season. That does not mean that there isn't drama happening in the driver market yet again. Franco Colapinto officially joining Alpine after massive speculation over the last few days and frankly over the last couple of months. He will be their test and reserve driver, although you've got to put that in some inverted commas because as far as we understand, Jack Doohan is on the verge of being kicked out of the team already before the season has even begun. What is going on at Alpine? Why are they doing this? That's a speculation we've got to dive into because some interesting rumours on that today. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Just beginning here real quick. Cullen, formerly Lewis Hamilton's personal trainer assistant basically for many years alongside his successes in Formula 1. Is this a coincidence? What do you guys think about it? Here she is skiing in red. People are like, oh, well, here she is wearing red. Bit of a coincidence. Hamilton's joining Ferrari. I know that she's worked, I think, with other drivers in other motorsports over the last year or so since Hamilton and her kind of surprise departure, I think right at the start of the 2023 season. But you guys may be noticing this, that just behind her in the background is a sign that has number 44 on it. So, is this just a coincidence? Is she trying to say something? I know there's been speculation on it today. She's standing far enough away from the sign that it's plausible that this is just a coincidence. It feels a little bit unlikely. There's a sign, it's just in the shot as to where she's standing. I don't know. But people were saying maybe Angela Cullen's hinting at a potential return alongside Lewis Hamilton with his move over there to Ferrari. Would be interesting, right? Because with Hamilton's move to Ferrari, basically all of his team that he's known for the last decade and a bit at Mercedes are now gone, right? I mean, okay, Loic Serra and a couple of others are going to be at Ferrari that he's worked with in previous years, but he doesn't have much of a team that he knows. He obviously wants to grow and mould that Ferrari into a team that can win and also support himself, but maybe he'd want somebody else that he's got some experience with on board as well. Just thought I'd mention it. One quick thing on Red Bull as well before we dive into the Alpine drama and situation. Horner was talking about losing Newey, losing Jonathan Wheatley, among others, over the last several months and saying that they've still got the strength in depth to make that work, but the reality is the RB21 will show us whether that is true or not, and well, Max Verstappen will show us with his decisions over the next couple of years as to where that actually is going to end up going. Juan Pablo Montoya, he has always fascinating perspectives, great driver, very aggressive personality in the sport back in the day, and he gave his thoughts on the Sainz situation because Christian Horner said probably a couple of weeks ago now that they are not closing the door to Sainz. Now, to be fair, this is one of the Horner things to say. I don't think they'd ever really do that, and as I speculated at the time, my feeling is the only chance that Sainz gets, goes to Red Bull as he was back in the day, obviously at Toro Rosso at the time, but the only time that Sainz would ever drive in my eyes for Red Bull Racing is if Max isn't there, just because they don't want to cause what could be a bit of conflict even between Jos Verstappen and Carlos Sainz Sr. The history there isn't great either. But Juan Pablo Montoya believes that this was Max's decision to say, look, Sainz isn't coming here and basically put his foot down and say this is not going to be happening. Whether you believe that or not, who knows? Obviously, if that is true, then you've got to speculate on the reasons behind it and whether that's fair or not fair. And Montoya says that's a smart move for Max rather than somebody who's scared. I don't think Max would be scared of any driver as their teammate, but I do think that if you're Max, you know that your chances of winning the championship are greater if you can beat your teammate 23 out of the 24 weekends. If you can only beat your teammate 16 out of 24 weekends, limits your chances of winning the drivers, helps the team and the constructors. But we know where Red Bull's allegiances tend to lie. But let's talk about Alpine. Today they confirmed Ryo Hirakawa as their test and reserve driver, or well, one of their test and reserve drivers. He will take part in FP1 for Alpine at the Japanese Grand Prix in April. He recently drove for Haas in the Abu Dhabi test. You guys might remember that, and also with McLaren in recent times as well. But that is not the end of the story today with Alpine. So Jack Doohan, son of motorbike legend Mick Doohan, is joining Formula 1. As he says, only 4,332 days later. See you soon at Formula 1. Tweeted this out today, this morning, right? Australian driver on the grid alongside Piastri with Ricciardo going last year. Pretty exciting stuff for F1 in general. Doohan gets the drive after Ocon's controversial departure. He drove at Abu Dhabi, did a respectable job, wasn't especially quick, but you wouldn't necessarily expect expect him to be, given his first actual race in Formula 1. The idea is just don't crash the car. However, we know full well Alpine have been interested in Franco Colapinto for some time. On the 3rd of December, it was said by Toby Gruner and the guys at MUS, the interest was over. Red Bull, they'd pulled out. Let's not forget, there was a world in which Colapinto could be driving a Red Bull next season. He came in to the Williams team, replacing Sargent, was more impressive than people expected off the rip. Yes, his Brazil, the end of the season, lots of crashes, it wasn't pretty, but his pace when he was on point was near enough where Albon was, and he had some very impressive weekends and turned a lot of heads. Red Bull were looking to maybe get him into the team. There was, as I say, a possibility he could have been driving the Red Bull alongside Max. I think maybe Helmut Marko wanted that, but it seemed like Horner preferred the Lawson route. And then with Colapinto, a bit underwhelming at the end of the season, they thought, you know what, Colapinto can stay at Williams. We're just going to promote Isaac Hadjar, because at the end of the day, if you are Red Bull, you've got to show that there is at least some promise in your junior program. And the thing is, Colapinto, a Williams man, they would like Colapinto, ideally, to replace their driver when one of their drivers goes. Sainz, Albon, you know, they may only be around for a couple of years. I'm sure that Williams would love them to be committed for the long term. And I feel like both Sainz and Albon are confident that in 2026, Williams can really take a strong leap forward higher up the grid. But hypothetically, when one of those guys leaves, Colapinto would be in position to step in. But the reality is, Colapinto is probably too good to be sitting on the sidelines in Formula 1 for 2 to 3 years. So there was a feeling that somebody would either try and loan him his services elsewhere, but obviously Williams and that certainly the team that is loaning him don't really want that, because if you're Alpine, you're loaning Colapinto to drive for you, then in a couple of years you have to give him back to Williams and they get the benefit of having a driver that you've trained up. You don't really want to mess around with that. You either get him or you don't. Alpine then also seemingly withdrew their interest. I speculated that maybe Briatore was just trying to start a bit of a bidding war with Red Bull, but maybe this was a bit of a strategy from Briatore in the sense that after calming things down to some extent, they're now back in the mix. And over the last couple of days, we heard reports from Argentinian media, and I was like, take it with a pinch of salt. Then we had the race talk about it. Then we had Planet F1 talk about it. And all of a sudden, earlier today, every news, reporting service under the sun were discussing Colapinto to Alpine. It was discussed earlier today. He's on the verge of obtaining the second seat. A very reliable source indicates Alpine would be close to concluding an agreement. An agreement could be announced as early as this week. Well, how about today? So then Autosport were talking about it. He's been linked to a reserve driver role. That, of course, is critical, that he is not the second driver to Gasly, or just, the driver. I'm not sure they're going to necessarily indicate number 1, number 2, but Gasly's the number 1. Let's be real. Whatever happens there, Colapinto's not been confirmed yet, but it ain't far away, especially according to rumours and the reasoning why they're doing this, as we'll discuss here in a second. It is, again, another Alpine shambles from the outside. I mean, think about the way they've treated their drivers over the last few years. The loss of Alonso, the loss of Piastri, now the loss, of course, of Esteban Ocon. It's not been a great time, but look, that is the way that Alpine seem to operate sometimes. And even Autosport went on to put this out earlier today. This is this morning, and people are talking about whether this is fair, or what are they, what are we doing here? Doohan hasn't even started. Give the guy a chance. Gasly out, Franco in, I'm seeing as well. And they put this out there, which seemed to imply that, maybe something was happening later in the day. And then we saw this, that Alpine's interest in Colapinto is still very much alive. He's going to join as a third driver, reserve driver. He is going to start, this being Doohan, the season at Alpine, but his position is reportedly precarious. And a couple of hours later, just a few minutes ago, really, as a recording, we got this confirmation from Formula 1, from Alpine, that Colapinto will join. So, 2025 has barely started, and already we've got a pretty remarkable development. Now, on paper, nothing has changed. Colapinto is just their test and reserve driver. But as I said at the start of the video, that definitely deserves some inverted commas, because there is clearly more to it than that. We know this guy has massive commercial appeal. Argentina, the support in the South American region in general, the amount of fans that were driving from Buenos Aires out to Sao Paulo for the Brazilian Grand Prix to support him on what was a pretty bad weekend. But nonetheless, that's a big deal commercially. Probably one of the big reasons why Red Bull wanted him to potentially replace Perez on some level if Perez was to go, which he did. So Alpine confirm it today. He joins us on a multi-year deal. Franco will be our reserve driver for 2025. So let's just keep in mind for a second, do you really think they would pay millions of dollars is what this will have amounted to? This is Formula One after all. They will have paid here millions of dollars to Williams to sign Colapinto on what they're calling a multi-year deal. Do you think they would do that for him just to sit there as the reserve driver? I think you got to think twice about that. So Colapinto obviously gives his statement. What I'm really interested in is Briatore's perspective, because this guy, we know he's a slimy operator, and, sometimes he's an effective operator, for good or for ill, in Formula One. We are very pleased to come to an agreement with Williams Racing to sign Franco Colapinto. Clearly, Franco is among the best young talent in motorsport right now. It is fair to say his appearance on the Formula One grid last year caught many, me included, by surprise, and his performances have been very impressive for a rookie driver. We have an eye on our future, and his signing means we have a great pool of young drivers to call upon and work with in developing the team for future success. So pretty clear cut. His signing means we have a great pool of drivers to call upon. So, there we go. The question therefore really becomes, why is Doohan not getting a chance? He is getting a chance, but if he doesn't win the first Grand Prix, he's probably getting dropped for Franco. I would say right now there is a 90% plus likelihood, probably more to be honest, that Colapinto at some point is in that car for Doohan. I just feel like it's almost inevitable with the way these things are going, especially with what we're going to discuss right about now. But they put Doohan in the car. Obviously, Ocon left in controversial circumstances. They had all the drama at Monaco with Gasly. There was drama behind the scenes going on. It became quite clear shortly afterwards that Ocon and Gasly, it was going to be one or the other, and Gasly had seemingly made enough friends within the team, and Ocon, they'd had enough of him, basically. They were going to get rid of him. Then at the end of the season, it was kind of interesting because excluding the second place in Brazil, Ocon was not performing as well as Gasly was, despite the fact that at the start of the season, Ocon was better than Gasly in many regards. At the end, Gasly was frankly cooking him every weekend, and Ocon was saying, our cars must be different or something. Alpine they're an interesting team. I don't think there's any real other way to put it, to be honest. And you never really know what you're going to get from this outfit at times. And with Briatore, you know what type of customer that we're dealing with here. So Doohan got the drive, but reportedly, he's just not impressed the team massively. And that's probably why they're signing Colapinto. This is the speculation we're going to dive into now on why Doohan is out before the season has even begun. And I think it comes down to their confidence in Doohan and the testing that he's done behind the scenes. Because on paper, you think, okay, Colapinto had his chance at F1. He drove several rounds. He was probably faster than people expected. Over the course of all of those Grand Prix that he raced, was he less crash happy than people expected? Maybe marginally, but not much. But most teams tend to rate Albon reasonably highly, so Colapinto's performance there, especially because Albon was destroying Sargent, and Sargent was bad, but maybe he wasn't that bad. Depends on your perspective, obviously. But Colapinto was immediately substantially better than Sargent, and very close to an experienced driver now like Albon, so he had a good performance, good debut, enough to prove on paper to other teams he's worth a go. If you put him in the car, he's going to do a good job. Even if his junior career wasn't spectacular, neither has Jack Doohan's been, but Colapinto, given the chance, delivered. So Jack Doohan, sure, similarly, maybe his junior career, it's not like he's been winning everything, looking like Bortoleto, for example, has had probably the most impressive junior career as the Formula 2 champion this year since Oscar Piastri a couple of years ago. He's coming into the Sauber. So, you can be pretty confident Bortoletto's going to be reasonably good at bare minimum. Doohan, difficult to say, but some drivers suit Formula 1 well, some drivers simply do not. But of course, you might think, you've got to give him a chance to see, what if he's just like Colapinto? And that is fair enough. The problem, I think, comes down to the fact that they may have testing data that indicates that Doohan could be a liability. Colapinto tweeted this out. Destiny was written at Alpine, and I think this is, yeah, he accidentally drove into their pit box, didn't he, at some point? So this guy Beanbag, Greg, or whatever you want to call him on the Reddit here, of course, pinch of salt. He's not particularly clear where he's getting these information pieces from, but I'll discuss where they might be from in a second, talking about why Doohan is under pressure, because supposedly the testing runs that Doohan has done in previous Alpines have just been pretty poor, like relatively lackluster. So there have been rumours over the last couple of months. Alpine don't necessarily trust him. Apparently his contract as well, I think I did see this somewhere at some point, is only like for 5 races. So well, I'm not sure if that's fully true, but Flavio Briatore said it the other day that he will start the season, but after that, who knows? So it's reasonably likely, I would say, that Doohan will have the first 5-6 races of the year, and if he's not great, they'll get rid of him. And these rumours have happened, you know, obviously about Doohan for some time, and I think the point is, as he says, it's not necessarily about Colapinto, it's more about the fact that they don't trust Doohan and they need somebody else, and they believe that Colapinto makes sense, especially because he does have serious commercial value to the team into the future. So I found a couple of articles here discussing at the start of November on the fact that Gasly was sent to do a test alongside Doohan, and there wasn't really much discussion on how this test actually turned out, but I think it's relatively clear that Gasly was intended by the team to effectively benchmark Doohan, and they did a test in November in their 2022 car intended to get Doohan up to speed as much as possible, and the theory goes anyway that Gasly turned up there to try and get a piece of how quick Doohan would be, and Doohan kind of got smoked, and it's not given them much confidence that he's actually going to be able to keep it up in Formula 1. And there was also discussion a couple of days later that he was doing a test, but rain had affected it, so both sessions, you know, his lap times were limited. Obviously, nobody knows really what happened in these sessions, but, you know, maybe it was raining and he span out a couple of times, or whatever, right? Something happens, maybe pace with respect to Gasly, or whatever, that did not give Alpine the confidence that Doohan is going to be a good Formula 1 driver. It may be different when he hits the track, but I guess the point is if he hits the track, because Colapinto is clearly the man that Alpine wants in that seat. I think there's no real other way to read this, but as it stands, Doohan will start the year. If it doesn't go particularly well, Colapinto is going to be in that seat. I feel like it's almost inevitable that at least the midway point of the season, by the time we get to the summer break, it will be a Gasly-Colapinto pairing at Alpine. Whether this is fair or otherwise, in Twitter, your thoughts in the comment section below. More drama within the French team as always. Just quickly, Greg Maffei stepped away from Formula 1's, well, okay, Liberty Media's CEO position quite a while ago. They've got a new guy. Derek Chang has now been confirmed. He, again, worked for lots of sports entities in the past. The point is going to be maximize shareholder value when it comes down to Formula 1 integrating MotoGP. Don't know if he's got any specific ideas for F1, but look, we know that Liberty have had some positive impacts on Formula 1. You could argue certainly some negative impacts as well. As ever, in Twitter, your thoughts in the comments below. But things are changing over there, maybe for better, maybe for worse, is somewhat difficult to say. And just one final little graphic here to close out the season. If this is anything to go by, the up, down, maybe Leclerc's not going to have the best year next year, but I would not bet on it. I think Leclerc's going to be a championship contender in just a few months' time. And very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.